unless it's just like an elven cultural thing and they're like celestial siblings, kind of like how, brother from another mother kind of thing. Just like, we're just real good pals now because we have this in common.
Sister wives.
Yep. Sister wives and brother husbands.
I hate the term brother husbands. It's so funny, but I hate it.
Never heard of it.
We may have coined it. I don't know.
And now it's out to at least 300 people around the world.
You're welcome. Be a brother husband to your sister wives.
Oh, God. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as I and our international hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. Quick run through the announcements. It's been every week. It is the last chance to apply to be a guest on seasons 5 and 6 of Breakfast in Beauclair. If you would like to be on our show and to share your thoughts with our international hanza, I would absolutely love to have you. You can apply to be a guest on Breakfast in Beauclair at bit.ly/witcherguest56. That's bit.ly/witcherguest56. The applications will be open through the end of January. You guys got 2 more weeks to apply, and I would love, love, love to have you on. We'll see you in Melbourne in April. We'll see you in Austria October. Hope to see you there. And, so we've got 3 more episodes left in the season, so we are looking ahead to the season break. Tentatively, Breakfast in Beauclair will break after February once our Blood Origin episodes are finished. And the current date that we're looking at is the first Thursday in July to come back. I'm super excited for this break. I know that you guys know that I'm excited. And in the meantime, I hope that you will join us on the Hanza Discord at bit.ly/the Hanza Discord between seasons. Thanks as always to our patrons and producer-level patrons, Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B., Ava of Gullet, B. Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Egberg Glamorai, Red Kite, the Original Roach, Connor's Cat, Libby, Wolf, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Silocybe Sorcerer, a Toussaint Knight, Miriam of Temeria, Softy, and Mary the Moo. As for this episode, Merete from the US and Mindy from the StoryTinker call in to discuss Netflix's The Witcher Blood Origin, episode 102 of Dreams, Defiance, and Desperate Deeds. Join us as we discuss how the worldview of each character affects their actions and decisions, the elven social hierarchy, symbolism within costuming and visuals, and our very best understanding of celestial siblings. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Netflix's The Witcher Blood Origin, episode 102 of Dreams, Defiance, and Desperate Deeds. Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name is Alyssa, and today we're welcoming 2 new members of our hanza to the show. My first guest is a mom, wife, and ex-professional cook hailing from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She's a voiceover actor who also volunteers with Able, an organization that translates media into audio and braille formats. She's a co-producer on our upcoming audio fiction series, Peculiar Radio. My second guest currently resides in New Jersey with her husband and 2 children, and came there by way of Brooklyn, New York, Israel, and Memphis, Tennessee. She's the host of the StoryTinker podcast, which does episode-by-episode discussions of both select webtoon stories and the main Witcher television show. Please welcome Merete from the US and Mindy from the StoryTinker. Hey, guys.
Hello.
So lovely to have you. I'm so looking forward to chatting with both of you on this episode, especially because both of you are in podcasting, which is very exciting to me. I rarely have podcasters on the show, so I'm super stoked. But I'd love to get to know you guys as well. As we're diving in, how did you both get into The Witcher?
I cannot remember if I watched the first season of The Witcher on Netflix before I met you, Alyssa, or because of you. But it was at least close in time. I started watching the Netflix show, and then you were so into the books and the lore and all that, I started listening to the audiobook. So I have listened to the first audiobook, and out of order, I have started listening to Blood of Elves, and I need to go back and correct the order of books that I have been listening to, but I now have the second and third book in my library to read. So
Super exciting. It's funny because my dad follows the Instagram, like the Breakfast in Beauclair Instagram.
sure.
And I put up a little reel a couple of days ago about like the correct order in which to read the Witcher series.
Oh, I saw that.
And he commented on it. He's like, why can't I just go to the first book? Like, I don't want to read the short stories. I'm probably going to make an entire reel about like, here's why you shouldn't go straight to the novels, but we'll get to that later. What about you, Mindy?
So I came to The Witcher in a very circuitous fashion because of my webtoons obsession, actually. So I love webtoons, and I, have a webtoons podcast. So one of the stories that I podcasted on was called Let's Play. And Let's Play was optioned by a production company called All Nighter. And I was trying to find out anything I could. I actually wanted to work on the production. So I was trying to find people to email and be like, hey, take me. So turns out the same people behind All Nighter are behind Hive Mind, and Hive Mind produced The Witcher.
Huh.
And so I somehow ended up, I was just like searching, and I ended up watching an interview with Lauren Hisrich talking about The Witcher. And I was like, wow, this sounds really interesting. And I love it. And I reminded myself, like, Mindy, you don't actually like violent movies. You don't like war. Like, you don't like any of this stuff. But I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And my husband had watched already. He's like, you're going to last 10 minutes and then you're going to shut it off. There's too much blood. And guess what? I loved it. And I just was obsessed. And I will admit, I do have to watch it with like my hand covering the screen for sometimes. But I fell in love with it. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. So when season 2 came out, I was really excited. I did that on the podcast. And I, interestingly enough, was very hesitant about reading the books because I didn't want to be spoiled for the show, which is like usually the opposite of what people experience.
I get that.
But I did read The Last Wish. And then we go to my friend's house a lot. They have The Witcher like right prominently featured. And I'm like, oh, yes, no, yes, no. And so, yes, now I'm reading the second book. I couldn't help myself. And I'm not sure, every time I read it, I find something that like the show has adapted, like either not yet or out of order. Something from the book 1 is in season 2. So I'm like, should I keep reading? Because I'm going to get spoiled. But I don't know. I might just read the whole thing.
I mean, I would recommend that you read all of it, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a huge fan. But it's so interesting because I rarely talk to people who come to The Witcher through the show specifically. Most people come through the books or through the games first. So I guess as you guys first dove into The Witcher, what were some of the things that really drew you to either the plot or to the themes that you found there that you kind of continue to explore as we, go into Blood Origin and the books?
First of all, I like stories with a lot of characters. I find that it's fun to see different types of people and their interactions with each other. And what I also really like about The Witcher, which I'm seeing a lot of in the books, is their gray morality. Nothing is simple. Nothing is black and white. Every character has nuances, good choices that they've made, bad choices that they make. You can sympathize with people even while they're making very bad decisions. I really appreciate that. And especially in the books, I've noticed he has a very, very cutting sense of humor. He's very caustic. He notices foibles and highlights them. He notices people's hypocrisies. He's very sharp like that. So I appreciate that. And he's not idealistic. A lot of fantasy speaks very idealistically. And, it's like Andrzej is much more nuanced, and his world is very, very gritty. It's not like a wonderful world. Like the characters are often dirty and they don't take baths and they're smelly. And it's the kind of thing that doesn't get talked about so much, but is 100% part of reality.
Yeah. I know that you guys wouldn't have gotten there, but there is an entire chapter in Blood of Elves where someone just gets diarrhea for the whole chapter. Like, there's nothing cute about certain aspects of the world.
Oh, God.
There's like something fun about that. Not about the diarrhea, but just about that reality.
Diarrhea is never fun.
No. But yeah, so what about you, Merete? Like, what brought you in?
Same things as Mindy. I also like the gray aspect of it. And I would say, too, that I like series that aren't precious with their characters.
Mm.
Like, I don't feel 100% secure that all of the characters that I start with in a season are going to be there at the end. So I really appreciate it hasn't been spoiled for me that anytime somebody's in danger, I'm like, well, they're certainly going to make it through. I'm not sure. So I appreciate that about the show as well.
The last thing that I love to chat with you both about is your podcasts and your experience with podcasts. I'm just curious, like, what brought you both to that medium, to this medium? We're on a podcast right now. What brought you both to this medium, and what are some of your aspirations in the future with podcasting?
Well, for me personally, I have wanted to get into doing voiceover, and I started my volunteer work in 2019 to kind of be a step into that. I've always enjoyed reading out loud in the stereotypical, like, I do funny voices kind of thing. And people tell me I should do voiceover work, but it's more than that. Just getting into podcasts over the last 10 years and more so into storytelling podcasts in the last few years, it seems really special to be able to come up with new ideas and make them interesting in a way that is not always achievable through TV or through books, and just to have something to play with. And, it's also a good excuse to hang out with some of my friends. I really, really enjoy having a place to go where we can be creative together, we can try new things, and just see what we're going to create in the end.
For me, I got into podcasting because of webtoons, which the fact that I got into webtoons itself was a massive surprise to me because I was like a literature snob. I have an undergrad in English, and I only read books written like before 1900. So that was a surprise. But anyway, I fell in love with a certain story, Midnight Poppyland, and I just felt the need to talk about it. I could not stop. I was like on Facebook, Instagram, like wherever the fans were, that's where I was. And I was like, this isn't enough. I have to talk more about it. I remember posting it on like the Facebook group, and I was like, what if we start a podcast? And they're like, yeah, great idea. And then I was like, okay, well, I think I have to actually start the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. And I have to say it's been amazing. This podcast has been wonderful. And I've met so many amazing people, and I get to talk about stories that I love every week, if not multiple times a week, and just fulfill that like fangirl need. It's just wonderful.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. There's like so many parts of both of your stories when it comes to podcasting that resonates with me as well. And I guess the last thing, do you guys have any podcast recommendations? If they like Breakfast Beauclair, they like The Witcher, what are some other things that you think they might like as well?
Obviously, I listen to your podcast and On the Path, which is another one that you work with. I love the dynamic between the two on Whiskey with Witcher. They're so cute. So they're two best friends, and like you can tell, like they're joking all day long. So that's in terms of Witcher. But I listen to Native Lang. That's more about like the structure of language and the broader view. He takes different topics. Lang focuses on specific languages. There's Jackson Crawford. He does Old Norse. There's History with Hilbert. Those are the ones I'm listening to like on repeat right now.
I would say probably the closest I get to podcasts that remind me of The Witcher would be the Marvel podcasts. So they've got a couple season run of the Wolverine story, and the sound engineering on that is fantastic. I really like the Wolverine character from Marvel as well because he fits, I think, in the anti-hero category to a degree, and there's something really gritty and fun about that for me. So I would highly recommend that. Not Witcher-related podcasts. I am into true crime, but probably not as much as other people I know. So I listen to My Favorite Murder, but for not murdery stuff, I would say I really like storytelling podcasts like The Moth. Heavyweight is also really good. Every Little Thing is delightful if you like a little bit of your daily dose of puns and humor and just learning fun things.
Well, thank you both for your recommendations. I'm sure that somebody out there will be very, very thrilled to start a new show as well. But as we move forward with today's show, today we'll continue our discussion of Netflix's The Witcher Blood Origin with episode 102 of Dreams, Defiance, and Desperate Deeds, in which Ayla, Fial, and Skian hatch a risky scheme that leads them into a firestorm of trouble. Meanwhile, Merwin stumbles on a secret. If you're looking for a quick synopsis of this episode, here is a synopsis from future Alyssa. In episode 102, Ayla, Fial, and Skian raid a bank in hopes of hiring sellswords for their quest to Zintrea. They're attacked by the Empire's army, leaving Skian with a fatal wound. The trio is found by Callan, also known as Brother Death, who takes Skian and the others to a healer in the Marsh of the Mists, where Fial and Ayla have visions of their pasts and futures. They meet Zachary and Sindril, celestial twins. In their hideout, Zachary heals Skian from the brink of death. Sindril tells Fial about his first journey through the monolith with Balor, and also during the coup in Zintrea. The group attempts to use a monolith to portal to the Zintrean courtyard, but are brought to another planet instead. In Zintrea, Balor and Aroden discuss descent around the Empire in the baths. A desperate kitchen hand attempts to assassinate Merwin, but the Empress is saved by an apprentice, Avallac'h. Merwin publicly demands that Avallac'h be her assigned protector, while she privately asks him to spy and learn how to open the monolith's portals with Sindril's book. Merwin escapes the palace and discovers Aroden has a common-born lover. Taking the High Commander by surprise, Merwin asks for Aroden's cooperation in dealing with Balor and Fial. In return, she offers status, power, and a place in her new empire to his lover, Brian. In the other plane, Balor kills 2 celestial siblings in order to briefly gain access to chaos magic. The voice tells him that sacrificing these children isn't enough for a true transformation, however, and he's left wondering what he will have to sacrifice for his ambitions. Meanwhile, we meet Meldorf and her trusty hammer Gwen, as she goes on a vengeful hunt around the continent for Taliesin of the One Eye, the elf who killed her lover. So now that we've gotten a lovely synopsis from voiceover Alyssa, I would love to dive into your overall thoughts on the episode, as well as episode highlights and lowlights. So what were some of your overall thoughts on episode 102?
I really enjoyed that this one brought in the rest of the crew. I would say lowlights. I wish they would have spent a little bit more time developing some of the other characters that came in. We spent quite a bit of time with Meldorf, learning her backstory and stuff, and I love this character so much, and I just want to know more about her, and she's such a delight and just a little bit psychopathic. But Brother Death comes in, and he just kind of seems like maybe he's dangerous, but then like that kind of gets a little bit burst for us. So that would be my critique.
I love journey quests. I love when people come together for a united purpose. So I enjoyed seeing that. My highlight was definitely like, it was like a 1 second thing where Fionn picks up Ellie out of the water and he's like, I got you, because I am like a sucker for romance and I want them to get together. So that was my highlight, like the 1 second there. Also Merewyn's amazing outfits.
Yeah.
And her hair hat.
Oh, yes.
Whoa.
You're a fan of the hair hat?
Yes, I am. It is so creative. It is weird. It's probably like wire underneath there, but it is so cool and so inventive. That was amazing. I also enjoyed seeing Eridan's relationship with Brian because once again, I like romance. So, Eridan, I'm very conflicted about in general, but I did enjoy seeing that. And the lowlight was the same for me. We got a lot of characters and I don't know much about them and I want to know more about them. So Meldorf was great. Fionn and Ellie, we have more information on. And then the other ones, I'm like, why are you here? What's your motivation? Why are you doing this very, very risky thing? I would have wanted to know them more.
I'll definitely agree with all of you. I think the production for this episode felt a little tighter because there was a little less SFX, I think, than some of the other episodes that we've seen. But the fight scene in the bank I thought was fantastic. I think the fight scenes in most of these series are like really well choreographed, especially when it's close combat. And it's just like Michelle Yeoh doing close combat. It's just great. So I enjoyed that part of it. It certainly feels like we're halfway through the show because it's only 4 episodes and we still have a lot to learn about our characters. So it's kind of that weird combination of like, we know 2 episodes were cut. So there was probably a lot more character development and character backstory that likely fills out those 2 episodes that we no longer have. I mean, who knows why they made the decisions that they made. This is only speculation that maybe we could have learned more about our characters had we had those additional 2 episodes.
I actually didn't know that there were 2 additional episodes planned for this. So that explains some things.
Yeah. So they originally had 6 and then for whatever reason, it was cut down to 4. They did reshoots, that sort of thing. As far as the episode discussion goes, I think this episode really covers a lot of groundwork for understanding kind of where everybody is, their stakes, and where their characters currently stand in the immediate aftermath of the coup that happened in the first episode. As we said, like a lot of pieces are shifting, and there's not a lot of like action necessarily that happens in this, even though there's a lot of movement, if that makes sense. And I'd love to start off with this question. To what extent does each character's worldview affect their decisions and motivations in this episode, and particularly across social classes?
I guess if I can start with Merewyn. Merewyn to me is very intriguing because she clearly displays a sympathy for her people. In this episode, she's attacked by a lowborn and she wants to go out on the street and understand what's happening to them. It looks like she's shocked at the state of the country. It doesn't look like she's really ever been out. I guess I'm curious about 2 things. I'm curious how much the state has like degenerated since the coup, because I'm like, well, was it always this chaotic and lawless and violent and poor, or did it get worse because of the coup? In which case, that would be very ironic because Merewyn's original intentions were for the good of her people. And if the coup ended up causing all this chaos, it didn't really work out. but Merewyn, she is obviously highborn and she understands that she has that status. She uses it, she tells Eridan, Baldur has this obsession with, being lowborn, but she definitely cares about the lowborn.
Merewyn specifically, it's so interesting because she's one of like the few red characters that we have in this series. Like they're always talking about how much she loves books and history and her heroine Solrith, and trying to emulate what her heroine had done with the conquest of the elves and the conquest of the continent. I think, as you said, it's interesting to see like how much good she wants to put into the world. She set out that coup because she felt that her brother had short-term vision. And she's coming from a position where she's reading about history. She has a long-term worldview, or what she believes is a long-term worldview, but it's in direct contrast with kind of the short-term needs of the people. So I think her aspirations right now are just so lofty. She's looking for space conquest, basically. But she has real needs in her kingdom right now that are just falling to the wayside because she's unaware of them, either due to her own ignorance or because Balor and Eredin are keeping her from that specifically.
I'm curious, too, to know how much time has passed between the opening scene in the first episode where she and her brother are in the streets, like specifically out there to mingle with the people, I believe is what they had said. And when Fjall saves her and the king from being attacked.
So allegedly, in a pre-release article, I believe the showrunner Declan DeBarra did say that the entirety of Blood Origin takes place in the month before the conjunction of the spheres. That's what I'm running with.
Sure.
But I would need to confirm that. I don't know if that had changed since they did like the reshoots and stuff. But I'm kind of running with the assumption that it's still 1 month of action.
So it could be, too, that she was just out there as a princess and her brother was doing like all of the mingling with the people, and she was just kind of, I don't know, watching Fjall or something while they were walking around. I don't know.
You know, this is something that I think about people in power and idealism, is what you said about long-term versus short-term goals. How many people are you willing to stomp over to achieve your long-term vision? Is it worth it if you are like killing and executing a bunch of people along the way? You kind of have sympathy for her, but you're also appalled by her other behaviors, like her complete blackmail of Avalach.
Yeah.
She's very clever. She twists it. She publicly announces he's going to be my protector. Then she blackmails him to being her spy. And she clearly doesn't care about him except for as a tool for her. But this is, something like for the greater good.
Yeah, I think she's certainly a character with which the ends justify the means. And I know that we had this conversation in episode 1 as well when we talked about the coup itself, but it's always for that long-term vision and for that ambition of leaving a legacy that endures for 1,000 years. So, I mean, whether or not she achieves that, Mindy, you'll have to see when you get to episodes 3 and 4. And then I guess when we look at some of the other characters like Balor and Eredin, they're coming from a position of power. Their worldview, it's interesting because they're almost two sides of a comparable coin. Balor comes from someone who was previously a lowborn and rose in the ranks to become a kind of respected member of the elite. He's in the palace. He's an advisor, strictly on magical matters, as we understand. But a lot of his worldview is colored by the fact that he had to make that jump. And that seems to affect a lot of his decisions. Whereas Eredin, as we learned from this episode, has always been a member of the military, which apparently has its own class entirely associated with it, as we learned from that conversation with Brian. So he is pulled in one direction by his rank. He's pulled in another direction by his love for a common merchant, I think, as Brian says. It's interesting to see what decisions that each of them are making based on that class dynamic as well.
Yeah, agreed. Regarding the Eredin and Brian relationship, just the fact that Eredin is letting his, lust for Brian kind of cloud his judgment regarding what kind of information he gives him and trusting that he's going to keep it a secret. And Brian, not being from that high class, he has to watch his own pockets and is a little more scrappy than Eredin, it seems like. And I was kind of surprised the way that they had Eredin react to the realization that Brian betrayed him by pulling a knife on him and holding it up to his neck and then kissing him softly. And I was like, I wonder if I would have had that same reaction in that situation. I don't know.
That was my thought exactly. I see it being done around a lot of TV shows with extreme reactions, but I'm like, this is not realistic. And we just don't do these things. You don't pull a knife and then kiss them right away. It's just so incongruous. Love that, switch is too fast.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that he cools off so fast, it's not even an angry kiss, really. It's just kind of like a resigned kiss, like, damn it, I love you. I can't do anything about this kind of a kiss.
Yeah. And regarding what you were saying about class, Eredin apparently had said something derogatory about his class to Brian. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. I said it I was drunk or something like that. So you could see that this is an issue between them.
Yeah.
And Besides for the fact that, whatever practical ramifications, I think he's still embarrassed just emotionally about being with someone who's not of the same class as he is.
Brian says to Aridin, no one will believe that you're with me, as you keep pointing out. I mean, I feel like there's multiple layers to this because we don't know how this elven society feels about queer relationships. Is there an embarrassment around being in a queer relationship? Is it really strictly about their class? We don't get that understanding of their culture. Maybe it's secrecy because, as Merwin does, she uses Aridin's relationship with Brian against him. So it could also have been that, but none of those things are really made explicit in the show.
Yeah, I'm curious about Aridin in general because he's not as extreme as Balor is, but he doesn't seem to be a particularly good person either. So I want to like him because he's more moderate, but then on the other hand, he hasn't shown me any good instinct or any instinct to preserve people. Just a little bit more pragmatic than Balor. Just okay, if we do this, if we kill all of them, if we hang up the merchants, they'll all go away and then we won't have food. I don't know. Do you get a sense of like Aridin's?
I guess a question for you then, Mindy, because Merete and I have of course finished the series.
Mm-hmm.
What might redemption for Aridin look like to you?
Standing up against Balor and doing something about the people and helping them rather than, going into Balor's paranoia, honestly.
My lips are sealed.
Yes or no?
I'm going to say that it seems Aridin is caught between two very powerful people because Balor has power of magic and Merwin has power of her status. And he's just like stumbled into this powerful place without any real anchor to hold him there.
Yeah.
So he is capable of being this ping pong ball back and forth between them. And I'm interested for you to see which side he ends up on.
I just decided I liked him. So I hope he is a good person because I want him to be, but whatever, I'm prepared to be disappointed.
So it's interesting that you say that, Merete, because as we're talking about it, it seems like Merwin has independent power, as you said, through her status and through her heritage as the ruling empress. Balor has inherent power because of his use of magic. Aridin's power is all external. The only power he has comes from the power that the armies give him. Granted, now it's, 3 United Kingdoms. We see at the beginning of the episode that they take down Brielle, I believe is the name of the town, or Byrell, a city which has never been defeated. But with the strength of all 3 armies, they're able to do so. But we also hear that there's a lot of deserters from the armies. We hear that in either episode 1 or episode 2. So all of his power is external and it's kind of crumbling away from under him. So I wonder if that's also part of Aridin's positioning, is that he doesn't really have any inherent power that can really support him in this new regime. Everything has to be gifted to him, but there's nothing that he can really do. And maybe the only thing that he does have control over really is his relationship with Brian.
Even that he doesn't have control over because Brian's out there blabbing their stuff all over town because he had a little bit of wine. Come on, Brian.
Which I have to say, and I guess don't tell me, but when Brian explained, he's like, oh, I was drunk. I'm sorry. It didn't really seem very believable to me. I was like, you probably just, wanted to help your friends get out.
Yeah.
That was what I assumed, but I'll see if it's confirmed or denied.
I got that same sense from that scene just because he did seem genuinely shocked when he found out that the grain stores for the palace were pretty much empty. I wonder if there was the wink and a nod, like, I'm drunk, I'm not telling you this right now kind of thing. And he thought it would be no harm, no foul. And turns out big harm, big foul.
One of the things that I always look at is supply chain is a big thing for me. The resources, their transport line, the production, labor. To me, I'm like, okay, wait, what was your empire like before? Why is it that everyone's starving now? They touched on it a bit, but for me, I wish it would have been a little bit more clear about what's going on, that they all are starving. Were they starving before? Are there not enough farmers? Is there too much war for people to farm? Is the transport line not moving? Are there wagons all broken or commandeered for the military? What is happening that is causing this food shortage? And the fact that there's extreme lawlessness, is there no police force or whatever the equivalent would be? Is it that people are well, there's a coup, so now I can do whatever I want? What happened to make everything break down so fast? Or was it already really broken before?
I mean, some of those aren't necessarily things that we see answered, I think, effectively in Blood Origin. There's certain things that are canon to the books. So, for example, at least from what we hear in the short story, The Edge of the World, allegedly, elves didn't know agriculture. That's something that humans brought with them. But it seems that in Blood Origin that they did at some point. So it's kind of that question of if we're assuming that this is all canon, or at least coherent in a timeline, maybe they had agriculture, lost it at some point, and then had to relearn it within a span of 1,000 years. But when it comes to the actual like logistics of the empire, it doesn't seem like they really had much. And I would imagine that because each of these kingdoms probably had their own functioning, or semi-functioning societies, maybe not all of that was translated after the coup. You're trying to merge 3 separate systems and 3 separate kingdoms into one empire. So I can't imagine that. That's probably a logistical nightmare for somebody.
Well, yeah, and in the first episode, how they were saying that the king wanted to have the peace because he could tell that his people were suffering, and he could only imagine that the people of the other 2 societies were suffering too. So, if you've already got everybody in a real low point.
Yeah, I did remember that. That was actually my question, which really more is an episode 1 question. The king wanted to broker peace, and then Merewyn was like, this is a bad plan. But then her plan was like, we're just going to unite. So I didn't quite see the difference between their plans and why her brother had to get killed for that.
Well, you see, her plan, she didn't have to be anybody's wife.
Right.
So that's what made it.
I think that is a huge part of it, like doing things her way versus in a way that would make her subservient to the same old system. Probably comes from a place of ego as well. She is the person with the answers. She is the person with the history. She's the one that knows that history is bound to repeat itself. And her brother, in her opinion, lacks the long-term vision. And even if he did maintain peace through whatever treaty he set up, it's bound to fail at some point. Whether or not this was the correct action to achieve those goals, who's to say? There's probably much less violent ways, much more effective ways in order to do this. From my understanding, she just basically wanted to break the wheel, as they said in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I guess if we could talk about Balor, because, class is like a massive thing for him.
Mm-hmm.
The way I see Balor is someone who had a very like traumatic experience growing up, and that chip is on his shoulder, and it's not a chip, it's like a massive wooden beam, and he just can't get it off. And like all of his actions are tainted, and I don't think he sees things clearly. Like, to me, it seems that he has this like I said, like before, paranoia or obsession with achieving power, and like he said, it's never enough. He does a lot to get there. He's sacrifices little children. And I think that he doesn't understand sometimes that maybe he's taking things too far, and that it'll just self-destruct, and that it won't get him his ultimate goals. Like you see when he's in the bath with Eridan's like, well, if you do this, then this will happen. If you do this, and this will happen. And he just doesn't care. I think that he's so blinded by his experience in the past as a lowborn and feeling so inferior, and he can't get over it, and nothing's ever enough to satiate him.
And there's also a little bit of disdain for the people that Eridan is talking about, just because of the way he talks about killing the merchants and just putting their head on a spike to send a message, and clearly oblivious to the fact that Eridan is in love with one of them. And, for some people that are working together on such an important military campaign and goal, like the fact that he doesn't seem to care anything about Eridan's backstory or know anything about him, at least in that scene, it doesn't come across. So,
yeah. He does have like a bit of a let them eat cake kind of line when they're in the bath as well. He does mention honey cake, which was a big plot point within Nightmare of the Wolf too, which is also a very popular recipe for Witcher Kitchen. Their spiced honey cake. Ooh. Oh my God, Merete, you should make that.
I should make that.
Yeah.
You leave the batter in the fridge for 2 whole weeks.
I'm in love with that. I absolutely would try a cake that hangs out in my fridge forever. Wow. Please. Yes.
I'll send you the link. I believe that it's delicious because all of the recipes are delicious.
Did you try it?
I haven't tried it, but I have tried officially one of their recipes as of last week because somebody made it for me.
Nice.
Which one?
It was the mushroom and plum soup. It was very good.
Okay, I'm looking up Witcher Kitchen.
An interesting combination.
It was really, really good. Continuing through, was there anything else about the character's worldview that interested you about the 7 specifically?
For me personally, Fjall coming from the dog clan, I found a lot of very dog-like qualities to him because he seemed so loyal to Merewyn even after he left. Like, he had to be told that she slit his sister's throat herself for him to finally shut that door completely and completely like lose his feelings for her and get on board with the plan to take her out, even though he already knew that she was at least alive from the situation that caused the deaths and the destruction of his entire clan, everybody that he knew. I just felt that they did a good job of naming the clan that he came from, because he very much embodied a dogged personality and the loyalty of a dog. And yeah.
Like, I wish I knew more about the other people's worldviews. The only reason I know, let's say, brother death, he's like, well, I'm joining you because they killed my village that adopted me and they were good people. So I guess I'm going to join you.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of the same for everybody. Like, you can kind of put them all under the blanket of like, we lost everything that we had and we have nothing more to lose, so fuck it, let's go kill the Empress.
Mhm.
They all kind of fall under that, even when that motivation is a little bit unclear. It does have that kind of like D&D sort of feel where like everybody is an orphan that suddenly finds their way into this one group and then now they're going on the quest
Yep.
together.
I will say for Skian, the fact that she already has the relationship with Ayla and her style of kind of testing the waters with her and Fjall, or every time I say Fjall, I want to just say y'all, which is, there's no reason for it. But just the way that she starts a fight with them to like subtly test the waters to see like, am I going to hitch my wagon to this situation? Like, is it worth it, or am I just going to get killed? Because she hasn't gotten to where she is without a certain level of self-preservation. We've had more time with her, so I feel like she's more interesting to me than the other characters at this point, besides maybe Meldorf, because she's my baby. I love her.
She's my baby.
I want to hang out with her.
So one of the characters that we didn't completely cover in the motivations part is really about Meldorf, who's been on her own for this episode and does achieve her goal between two scenes. So what do you guys think that we learn about her across her scenes and her monologues?
She's a sassy little firecracker, a little bit crazy.
I would die for her.
No, I just love her chaotic energy that she brings to the group, and just like, she has a goal and she has a plan for what to do. And unfortunately, like the 7 so far, she doesn't seem to have a plan for afterwards, but dang it, she's going to get it done. So, and I just, she's a firecracker and I love her.
I want to say also that Meldorf's introduction, just from like a production perspective, was so good. It was fantastic. You know, you just have the camera on the outside of the building. You don't see what's inside, but it's so powerful. You just hear the sound effects. You see the people being tossed out the window. It's fantastic. And I also love when she was painting, you know, it looks like she starts out painting all peacefully. She's an artist. It's like exalted. I was like, no, she's painting in blood. I knew it right away.
Yeah.
It was so wonderfully executed and so dramatic and just vivid and wonderful.
Yeah, I also wanted to talk about that opening shot when they're panning that one continuous shot outside of the building and you hear the battle that's going on inside, a little bit selfishly, because it is a plug, I think, for audio fiction and really good immersive sound engineering. Because what it achieves, it allows you to imagine what's going on inside without having to explicitly show you or coordinate that fight scene, or have all the SFX or prosthetics that would go into something huge and bloody like that. And it allows the viewer to feel that of their own accord and put into your head how deadly Meldorf can be. And if you like immersive audio like that, you're going to love audio fiction.
Yeah.
Merete, for you, like, did you have any thoughts about that too, coming from the world of like audio engineering and immersive audio?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to Gabriel Urbina and his workshop on how to write for audio fiction, and how he beautifully explains how to write for scenes like this, where you show, don't tell, but in audio form, and let people, sorry, Gabrielle, I hope I'm not giving away all your secrets if you're listening to this one. But also to to let people imagine for themselves, because if you want to have people create an image in their minds, they are going to create the image that best fits the situation for them, rather than have to borrow an image that you create for them. And they did an excellent job with it, walking us through the start to finish of her getting in that building and just kicking a bunch of ass.
We see her get into the building and we have no idea what she's going to do in there. And then she starts fighting. We like hear the confrontation, we hear the fights, we hear the deaths, like, and then we see somebody fall out of the building. So that reveal of what she's going to do is, I think, very fun. You suddenly start to imagine and build this additional world based on what the characters are saying or what suddenly appears in the audio. And I'm so glad we got a scene that really focused on that here and allowed the viewers to imagine more about the character.
And I would like to say, too, that we don't see her actually hit anybody in that scene, but it sets us up for, like, whenever she does find this guy that she is going to find, he's in for a world of hurt.
On the flip side, we get something incredibly vivid when Fial and Ayla go into the marsh.
Mm.
So I'd love to turn the conversation over to that as well with the question of what do Fial and Ayla's vision in the marsh tell us about their past and their futures? And what do you think is the symbolism behind some of their visions? So we see things like the black sludge, the dead lark, so on and so forth. What did you guys think of this scene?
Thought it was amazing. I have dreams all the time. To me, they're very obvious, like to interpret. I love when people use a slightly elevated, visual way of expressing a concept. I thought it was fantastic, beautiful, like gorgeously done. So, what I remember about Fjall, obviously you see that him, being intimate with Merwin, it goes from something nice, and then you see it's only on her. The focus is just on her and her pleasure, not on him at all. He's terrified and like grossed out. And then you see she's just the source of negativity. There's black stuff coming out of her mouth, and it's like his vision of her has shifted to something poisonous and to something treacherous and to something evil, which previously he didn't have. There seems like there was affection between them.
Yeah.
I can see his pain where the person he thought he loved is not the person that he knew, and either she's changed or his understanding of her has changed. And it's heartbreaking to see that. But it's fantastic.
I would say, too, the fact that they bring his brother into the scene and how that is a huge trauma for him. And they mention it when he's leaving Zendrea, and I wish they would give us more about what happened there, because I know that they're setting up his backstory, his motivations and stuff, and they give us a little bit more here. But I wish I had more of the feeling of their brotherhood and just like how close they were, rather than just like, I had a brother and he died and I'm sad about it. Watching episode 2 right after episode 1, not that we got a long sex scene between Merwin and Fjall, but just how much more over the top the dream sequence seemed to be before she started puking black tar. I just the fact that everything in the dream seemed exaggerated too. It makes me wonder how it corresponds, even the scenes with his brother, how that corresponds to what his reality would have been, or if that is heightened too, just because it's from his perspective.
I remember in the first episode thinking, their relationship and how she was pushing him, oh, like, you really like me. And he's like, I can't, I shouldn't. And then she really pushes him. And I think that in this dream, he's finally realizing that how selfish that was of her, because, she's only concerned with her own pleasure and not with what could happen to him.
Yeah.
And the end of that dream is showing him that.
I think it's interesting because I think Fial's side can show us, one, without spoilers for you, Mindy, a glimpse into his future. But also it illustrates the things that we already know about Fial. We already knew about his relationship with Merwin. We already saw, or heard about rather, the death of his brother and how that's affected him. But it doesn't necessarily add anything new, I think, to that conversation. I think conversely, we find out a lot more about Ayla through her vision, because it gives us an entire backstory that we weren't privy to before. I think I would agree. I would have loved to see, more about Fial, something new that would have been revealed to the audience in this moment. Maybe it is really more about the depth of his relationship with his brother, not just in his final moments of death. Because with Ayla, we see the way that she earned her Raven Clan tattoos was burning a family alive. And then they had like that little jump scare in there, which was like, oh, hated that. Knew it was coming. 100p tell it was coming, but still hated that jump scare. But I think that we learned a lot from Ayla's vision between that trauma, what would have really pushed her out of the clan, or what made her leave, as well as the symbolism of this dead lark covered in that same tar, which, again, I think could be a really nice metaphor for a couple of things, but it's all spoiler stuff, so maybe we'll get into it in episode 4.
I thought it was interesting for Ayla's scene how much I assume that was her mom that was pushing her, was like encouraging her to go through with this horrific act. And it's interesting to see that that's how her clan deals with whatever these people have done, because they were already caged. They already couldn't get out. Kind of makes you wonder, what did they do to deserve that extra step of being burned alive and punished in that way?
Yeah, the Wicker Man is not an unheard of punishment in the Witcher series, nor in fantasy and in history in general. Like, it's that question of like, was this worth it for her to earn her tattoos?
Was it justice?
Yeah. And I think to me that what I appreciated about this was that, in episode 1, you know that she's left the clan, and you kind of get the sense that she's not into war, and she's a little bit more peaceful, with her song and singing and music. But this just shows you, but you clearly see in episode 1, she still has a very strong love for her clan. And,
Yeah.
She has that conflict of like, I love them, but I don't want to be with them. And now this just makes you understand why. And it also shows how even when the people, the clan has done disgusting things and horrible things that make you want to leave, you still love them because they're your family. It's very poignant to show like you can still love people who do terrible things. And also, how do you forgive yourself when you've done something like that? How does she live with herself?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's very powerful. I don't know if we'll see more about how she's tried to redeem herself. I kind of assume that she seems like the kind of person who would try to make up for what she's done in some way. I don't know if it happens in 3 and 4 or if it's just not touched in the story, but she seems to have enough of a moral compass where that would be something that would guide her actions in the future.
Yeah.
And try to make up for that.
It's interesting that you say that because through episode 1 and episode 2, we have not touched upon the theme of remorse really at all, I think, because very few people have any regrets about what they have done up until this point. We talked about the ends justify the means with Merwin and Meldorf. Even Fial, like, he kind of takes his exile with a grain of salt. Like, obviously he didn't want to leave, but he did what he did, and now he's out, so he's just going to have a good time.
Just out hitting up brothels.
Yeah. Oh my God, the line about, like, buttering up the cat. I was like, I can't.
Yes.
Like, I can't with this. But it's interesting to hear you talk about Ayla's vision because, yeah, we understand the reason and the depth of her remorse and the fear that she had around that entire incident. So I think that gives us, again, like another layer to the character that I wish we got with Fial. But I like that we begin to explore that theme of remorse and regret here because we haven't yet. And it's one of the smaller themes, I think, of the entire show.
They touch on it a little bit on in the first episode where Ayla has her vision read for her and she says, I'm going to find my redemption. And until now we're like, redemption for what? And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. One of the other things that we learn in this Marsh of Mists is this idea of celestial siblings. This is something that comes up when Balor sacrifices the 2 children in that other sphere. He calls them celestial siblings. We learn that Zachary and Sindral are both celestial twins. So this isn't a concept that at least I remember being in the books or in the games. I believe this is something that was created for the show. So I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on like how the concept of celestial siblings might expand our understanding of magic on the continent. As I was kind of noodling on the Discord and chatting with people, I was coming up to the question of like, what's the extent of like commonplace magical abilities, like what Balor has or what Avallac'h has versus celestial siblings versus the chaos magic that Balor wants? I'm just not really sure how the magic is working. So I'm curious to hear from you guys how you think celestial siblings expand on that.
Yep, that's a kind of a.
If you have any thoughts, we can also cut this question. I can talk about it in like a later episode too.
Well, I was also thinking about that, not to that depth, of course, but just trying to understand what the significance of the celestial twins. Do they make each other stronger? Is there something about them that they are born at the same time under the same stars in the same place for a purpose? Like, are they supposed to be like 2 sides of the same coin? It's not 100% clear to me because I see that Zachary and Sindral kind of look like 2 sides of the same coin, just like physically very different. But even their magic is not necessarily 2 sides of the same coin. Like Zachary has the vines that she doesn't. She seems to be the more powerful of the 2, at least in the effects that we see from her magic. And Sindral looks like he can open the doors or whatever it is that he's supposed to be able to do with the.
Your power is hard.
Oh no! Oh Jesus! Yeah, so that's a very interesting point to explore, and I wonder if that is part of one of the 2 episodes that got cut, where they go into that more.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm like so conversant with the magic on the continent to begin with. So my 2 cents are maybe 1 cent, but I always find it interesting, when comparing like if in a world that already has magic, what's considered normal and what's considered extra. So the chaos magic obviously is new. So that is something that is deemed to be more powerful. At least Balor says it's more powerful. So I don't know if, the next 2 episodes we find out what makes that better than the magic they already have. Because honestly, like just from what I see here, it looks like the level of magic they have in Blood Origin before this chaos magic is the same as The Witcher, where they already have the chaos magic. I didn't notice anything discernibly different. So I don't know. And then in terms of celestial siblings, I got the sense they just have more power, and then maybe that they're bonded together in a better way, so they understand each other better. Maybe they can read each other's minds a little bit. That was kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more clarity that we could have when it comes to magic in general. A lot of the questions they had were around like, okay, if chaos magic came to the continent via the conjunction of the spheres, what was the existing form of magic? Does everybody have it? Chaos magic, what happened to make it so prevalent on the continent in the time of The Witcher then, if Balor is just trying to get it? My mind was like running with thoughts. I was like, what does this mean? I wonder if the concept of celestial twins is also something that will somehow tie into the main series or to future anime series or spin-offs. Because like I said, I don't think that we've seen that concept in any of the books, not that I can remember, at least not labeled as such, not as like celestial twins. There are certainly things like we saw Renfrey in The End's Beginning in the main Witcher series, episode 101. She was like a child of the Black Sun, a daughter of the Black Sun. They were notorious for potentially being incredibly violent and insane. We've heard about other people that could be born with certain, not necessarily mutations, but under certain circumstances. So this might just be one extra thing to add on to it. But I'd be curious to hear if celestial twins will have some sort of relevance in future episodes or future seasons of the main show as well.
Yeah, that'll be interesting if they bring it in.
As we, I guess, talk about some of the other storytelling aspects of episode 2 and of Blood Origin as a whole, the costuming is something that we enjoy talking about continually, especially with Merwin, because, you know, couture. We love it.
Yeah.
But Merete, one of the questions that you wanted to ask was, how does the costuming reflect the state of our characters scene by scene? There's a lot of things that happen here, a bunch of costume changes. What were some of your thoughts around that?
I mean, of course, as you said, Merwin jumps out. This is kind of episode 1, but not kind of, it is episode 1. When she has her scene with Fjall after she's been rescued from the mean streets and all the bad guys, she's completely underneath her robe. She's completely naked. She has no makeup on. Her hair isn't done. She's just completely bare. And it's just like this literal and figurative naked moment with Fjall. From there, we see her makeup and costuming get a little more extreme from scene to scene. Like when she's presenting herself as the Empress to her people, she's wearing this like very rich royal blue that there's more of a navy, I guess. I'm not a designer, I don't know. But it's this gorgeous blue that she's very boldly wearing. And Mindy, as you said, that hair hat that she had on and her bright red lipstick kind of made her look a little bit mysterious and sassy at the same time, I guess, for me, for that scene.
Yeah, I think especially, you know, that the costume choice for me in that scene with the hair hat and the lipstick, that happened when she decided to take control. And when she decided, I'm not going to be stuck in the palace. I'm going to forge my own destiny. I'm going to do what I need to do. And I think that she put that on when she was planning on intimidating Aridin and, you know, try to get him to be on her side. And I think that was a deliberate choice to be as superior, as elevated, as rich and royal as possible to aid her case and be persuasive. And I think that was a deliberate choice. I don't know if she just naturally loves fashion, but to me, that was like, okay, I have to bolster my own self-confidence. I can do this, and I'm going to make my outside reflect that.
I mean, I know I certainly do that when I'm just like, I feel like looking hot because I got something to do today. Interviews, whatever, date, whatever, wedding, whatever. Definitely, I'm just like, I'm going to look hot.
That's right.
Yeah. And then it mentally, though, prepares you for certainly whatever you need the resolve to go do today. In that scene, though, as well as in the bath scene, Aridin is really interesting because we almost always see him in his armor or his regalia. The two places, I believe it's only two in this episode where we don't, is one where he's in the bath with Balor and talking about the state of the country. Like, it is a vulnerable moment for him because I think he's talking about all of his uncertainties around the future of the Empire and whether or not they'll be able to watch it succeed. And then the second time that we see him is when he, you know, obviously comes out of bed, he's shirtless, he puts on like a very light, loose shirt, still tucks a knife into his
Which
back.
is so dangerous. Like, just a raw knife right in the back of your pants. Like, bro, get a sheath, something.
I know. At its least dangerous, it's just going to cut through the elastic. At its most, he's setting himself up for some serious injuries.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's also, I think it's that kind of dynamic where he and Brian are so caught off guard, and him even more so with his costuming where he doesn't have any armor on and Merwin is kind of like dressed to the nines.
Mhm.
So it kind of pushes that dynamic even a little further out.
I think that costume is especially provocative considering it's coming shortly after the scene where she's been attacked and she's wearing that really pale kind of nude colored dress that has all the flowy elements to it. That kind of makes her, to me, look like she's stepping back and like not quite camouflaging, but just like it's not the pop of color that the lipstick or the grand reveal dress is. It's very hidden and shy and muted compared to everything else that she wears.
And you were saying about Aridin and Balor in the bath. To me, and if you remember Balor's posture, he was leaning back, he was comfortable, and Aridin was up and stiff. I feel like Balor put him in the bath to make him uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And to intimidate him, and be like, you're naked and you're going to feel out of place, and I'm going to tell you my plan and you're going to follow along. Right. You talked about how Aridin's always wearing that military uniform.
Yeah.
Brian's outfit is like open, it's gauzy, it's glittery, he has makeup on. And then like, you could tell, loose lips. His whole outfit is more flowy and loose. And like, he doesn't seem uptight about anything. He's like, he lives and let lives, and he just like talks when he shouldn't be talking. So I think that his costume really fit with his personality.
Even his hair, they both have like similar kind of like shoulder length hairstyles, but his is very kind of like flowy and like loose and bedheady for Brian, and then Aridin has like tight curls. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think they're probably the costumes that changed the most in this episode. I think almost everybody else is in their standard issue costumes for this episode, like the Seven and Fenric and everybody else.
Fiyal adds a scarf.
Fancy.
Oh, I did love that Fiyal has a black eye because, fights actually have consequences. And I was noticing when it started fading, I was like, it looks like it's fading pretty fast, but whatever. Like, it's nice that, and he has the wound, which festers and it hurts him. Like, I appreciate that there's actually consequences to fighting, and, you do get injured and it doesn't, just like pop up, like a spring flower again.
I appreciate the details for whoever does the hair for specifically Meldorf, because her hair looks incredible, first of all, but also it looks like somebody that isn't quite taking care of it anymore, kind of like that trash punk or gutter punk or something like that would describe it, because it's got a little bit of a faux hawk element to it, and it's got all the braids, but it's not super neat.
Like pin neat.
Yeah. There's like wispies and like it's been lived in, but it still looks so good on her. So I just appreciate that detail to her costuming.
I feel like she's got more important things. She's still going to look hot doing it, but
yeah,
she's got important things going on.
I think also, if I recall it correctly, Zachary was wearing like a white dress. So that to me invoked like her role as someone who's peaceful. So a healer is a peaceful position, someone who doesn't have to fight. Obviously her outfit is not at all like geared for fighting. So even without knowing anything really about Zachary, just her outfit kind of reveals what her role is.
I mean, even Sindral is in like kind of a matching cream colored shirt and pants combo. So the two of them are both dressed in white, which I think again makes that visual connection between them both. Almost everybody else is in like earth tones for the most part.
Yeah, it's also like Skion's outfit is also warlike, but elegant and refined and a cut above. Like you can tell she's the master, She has clothes that are good for fighting, but still very nice and elevated. And, Fiyal and Elia are like much more pragmatic.
Absolutely. And I think as we come to the end of our discussion here, I'd love to ask you both, like, what themes did you identify throughout episode 102?
I guess for me, the biggest theme that stands out is that this is probably because I think about these things in general, like in terms of world politics, is that sometimes your change is not going to turn out the way that you want it to, and that idealism can be very destructive. Yeah, and that people in power are often very selfishly motivated and don't have the interests of the people in mind and just concerned with keeping themselves in power. That was just very striking to me. And I know that's like the genre, right? This is like, okay, this is a power hungry people, grabbing power for themselves. But that was like a big thing that struck me. Another thing is that people's motivations for revenge will sometimes also cause them to do things that are short-sighted. Both the Seven and the Empress, their emotions blind them to thinking long-term.
I would say for me, the theme for this one is found family. whether it's on purpose or on accident, because we've been collecting characters up until this point, and they spend this entire episode collecting new characters and finding their common ground. No spoilers. Hopefully we see it grow to be a little bit more found in later episodes, Mindy. Even Merwin finding her people, like realizing that she can't trust Balor and trying to bring Eredin to her side and wanting to find her place in this role and bring her vision to be reality so she can show her people. She seems to genuinely want good for her people, but she has to show them that she can do that and make them love her.
Yeah. I think for me, some of the standouts for this episode were, one, do the ends justify the means? We see that with Meldorf, with Merwin, with a lot of other people in this episode as well. And I think that it's a interesting question to continually ask ourselves as the series moves forward. And the other thing that I think always stays with me as well is just this idea of desperation and what happens when people are pushed to a point of desperation. We saw that with Merwin with the coup. We're seeing that happen with Balor, where he's kind of driven to the state of wanting more, but he's so desperate to overcome his past. I think the same thing with Ayla, like she left because of the circumstances that she was put into with the Raven clan. I think this theme of desperation and ambition pushes us through the rest of Blood Origin. So I'm excited to kind of continually talk about that in relation to some of the other themes that we have throughout the series as well. So as we come to the end, do you guys have any final thoughts on episode 102 of Blood Origin?
It's so hard to have like final thoughts on a second episode in a 4-episode run series.
This is the mid-season episode, I guess.
They're ramping up to the final ramp up. I feel like this episode is doing a really good job kind of starting to put people in their corners where they belong. And we're finding out where people's loyalties are, where they land on the scale of good to evil a little bit more. And it's starting to make you question things that you already assumed about everybody. And I'm looking forward to everybody figuring out what comes next.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was, interesting. I want to learn more. I want to see how the 7, execute their plan and how badly it'll go, because I'm sure it will. No offense, 7. But, and then honestly, the thing that I'm looking forward to, because I'm a sucker for romance. I want to see if y'all, and I never pronounce her name right, Ayla, Ellie, whatever, if they get together, because I want that to happen. Or someone has to get together.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited for you to finish the rest of the series as well, Mindy. Let us know what you think too, because I would love to hear more from you about the series as well. That is it for our show today. Merete, Mindy, thank you guys so much for joining me for this episode, and thank you to our Hanza for listening. So where can people find you both, and is there anything that our community can help you with, or anything that you'd like to share with them?
I'm Merete Mose. You can find me on the socials. I'm not super terribly active on there. Right now, I've got a couple of audiobooks that have my voice in them out on audible.com. There is one called Emily of New Moon. It's produced by the Online Stage. I've also got a couple of really small parts in the Online Stage version of the Iliad and the Odyssey, so look for those on Audible. Otherwise, stay tuned for Peculiar Radio from Lengthy Tangent. That's going to be coming out later this year.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I will be looking out for those. So yeah, I have a podcast. If you happen to read webtoons, I podcast on 3 stories: Purple Hyacinth, Midnight Poppyland, and Let's Play, which is not going to be on webtoons anymore, but okay. So you can look at the past episodes. And I've done The Witcher as well. And if you like poetry, you can check out my website, mindyshaper.com. I have a lot of poetry there, and some very amateur music videos as well.
Well, I'm excited for all of our listeners to check out all of your recommendations and all of your shows. Next episode, join us as we discuss The Witcher Blood Origin, episode 103 of Warriors, Wakes, and Wondrous Worlds.
You doing all those announcements in one take is so impressive.
Usually I don't.
Well, you did it.
Thanks for joining us at The Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and a complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbooklore.com. Breakfast and Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen. It's hosted by Alyssa with The Times, which is on East and by Alyssa Flix. The show is edited by Alyssa with music from Filter Media. Breakfast and Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City, with Louise of Cobra, the owner of the Charlotte Porpoise, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob the Ava of Gallipy, Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Bangor, Glamour Red Kite, the original Roche, Connor Cat, Libby, Wolf, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Silas Type Sorcerer, Toussaint Knight, Miri of Temeria, Softy, and Mary the Moo. Special thanks to Merete and Mindy for joining us for this episode and our international Hanza for their support.